Hi guys, the quad you see below you is the Geprc MSX3, is it? Or MS3? Basically the Geprc Sparrow, the True X version. And the idea behind this one was, rather than going for all-out performance, basically a 5-inch beating 3-inch build, like I did on the Advance Zero S3M. I wanted this guy to be a little bit tamer, and basically just to be a throw in your bag freestyle quad, which will be fast enough to have a bit of fun with, but isn't going to be screaming fast and terrorize everybody. So I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I flew it today and I've posted the DVR footage online, and you can see from the DVR footage it flies pretty nicely. It's nice and smooth, and because these motors aren't super powerful, you're not kind of fighting altitude gain or any of those things which you get on a smaller, I should say a more powerful 3-inch build. So essentially what we've got here, if I just go through the build, is the obviously the frame itself, the Gep Sparrow, and I don't know how much you're going to see, apologies for this, but the lighting's pretty bad. I've used the racerstar 3,500 kV motors, the 1407s. We've got gemfan flash 512 props, which are my favourite ones. We've got a runcam micro Swift 2. We have a VTX or 3 VTX. On the back we have the Demonrc UFL connected antenna, and I've got to say I absolutely love these things. I don't know how much you saw from the video, but the reception is absolutely incredible for something so small and weighing less than 2 grams. And these things are far more robust than, for instance, the Lumineer Axi antenna, which I really liked as well, but it broke on the first big crash that I had. Whereas this thing is kind of made from a bit of a rubberized plastic, and there isn't really a lot to break in it. Now, when I built this, I wanted to build this using the Turnigy Evolution, and the problem with Turnigy and FlySky receivers is that they are much larger than the FrSky counterparts, which made this build a little bit more challenging than it would have normally been. If I was using a Tyrannus and an XM Plus receiver, I could have simply sat the receiver under the front here where you've got acres of space to play around with. But because I'm using, in this case, a FlySky X6B, and I've used the X6B rather than the IA6C, which comes with the Turnigy Evolution, simply because it has much shorter antenna. The Evolution receiver has antennas which would stretch to the moon and back. They're ridiculously long, so I've basically swapped the receiver from the FlySky i6X and the Turnigy Evolution around, because the Turnigy Evolution receiver is far better in a bigger quad, and the FlySky X6B is far better in a smaller quad. And then the components are pretty similar to what they were in my XLR4 Space Cowboy build. Again, I've got a little tiny 4-in-1 ESC, a 20 amp one, which I got from Banggood. I've got another mini F4 omnibus flight controller with a 3 amp back and a built-in LC filter. There's quite a few of these on Banggood. Don't get the one with the 1 amp back, the older one, because it's absolutely rubbish. It doesn't like 4S whatsoever, and you get tons of issues with the back overheating, jittery motors, all that sort of stuff. Whereas this one has been absolutely bulletproof in all the quads that I've used it on. And on top of that, we've just sat the FlySky X6B receiver, and it's basically just sat on a couple of layers of double-sided clear foam tape. On this particular frame, it does have mounting holes for 30.5 and 20mm flight controllers, and the FlySky X6B receiver has mount holes itself for the 30.5 if you file them out slightly. And my original idea was basically to use these 30.5 holes and essentially just run a couple of spacers up and hard mount the receiver on top. But this frame is really slender, really thin along this axis, and the actual receiver would stick out so far that I just felt it was exposed to basically crashing. So it just works better just to essentially use double-sided tape, mount the receiver inside, and because this particular flight controller has got the MPU 6000 gyro in it, it's not particularly sensitive to vibrations, so that's going to cause no issues just sat on top there. And because it's so tight in there, there's no danger of it coming out. The rest of it, once I'd worked that out, was pretty straightforward, because these two guys, the 4-in-1 ESC and the flight controller, simply attach with this 6-pin cable here, basically one to the other. There isn't a huge amount of wiring to do. It's just a case of wiring in your camera and the VTX. And this particular receiver, if I turn it over, can you see? What I would usually do on my own builds using this receiver is essentially depin it and deconnectorize it, and basically just take off as many connectors as I could. But because I'm probably going to sell this one on eBay, I've left those connectors on because certain people like them. I've also, in this case, connected the battery telemetry wires, because some people will want that telemetry to go to the Turnigy Evolution. In my case, when I used to use the Turnigy Evolution a lot, I never bothered with those wires because I just found the beeping irritating. Even though you can essentially what the radio will do is it will beep if your voltage drops below a level that you set. And on the updated firmware of the Turnigy Evolution, you can set basically a minimum threshold that a voltage has got to fall through before it beeps. And it's a great idea in principle, but when you're flying with your goggles on, you can't see your radio. My OSD tells me everything that I need to know about my battery, because we've got the Betaflight OSD, so it's surplus to requirements for me. But I've put it on just in case anybody wants to fly line of sight. You'll notice that I haven't used a few ports to this build. The kit itself comes with a little tiny LED which clips in the back here, and I haven't put that on simply because it's tiny. It's absolutely worthless. When your quad's moving away from you and its nose is down like it will be, you won't really even be able to see it, and all it's really doing is adding weight and draining your battery. It serves no purpose whatsoever. If you want a strong LED, just get one of those big 12 volt ones that you can put on the top. The other thing that I haven't used is the frame comes with so basically plastic antenna tubes. And if you look at the photographs or the pre-made one, you'll see the antennas sticking up and out like this. I haven't used those, and essentially, they basically go into those holes in the little carbon plate there. I haven't used those because I think in any quad, the worst place for your antennas is to be basically sticking up, where they're going to get tangled in every branch or twig that you come across, and every time you land upside down, they're going to get bent and damaged and hit by the props, etc. So like always, all I've simply done is run my antennas along the inside of the arm, and then just used zip ties and heat shrunk over the top to hold them in place. And as the props spin round, the air keeps those nice and low, so there's no danger that you will hit those antennas. You still get great reception running like this. I've never had any fail safes, and I just think it makes for a tidier build. So this little guy, all up with its props on, and the lipo Velcro strap, weighs 153 grams. So it's basically 20 grams heavier than my Zero S3M, and that weight comes from a number of different sources. One, the motors are a gram or so heavier than the RCX which I'm using on the Zero S3. This frame weighs 39 grams as opposed to the 27 grams on the Zero S3, and the FlySky receiver weighs about 4.5 to 5 grams versus the 1.5 grams of the FI Sky receiver. So basically that's where that weight has come from. These motors, as I said in my video on 1407 motors, they run really cool, and they're really quiet and smooth. They don't put out huge punch. When I was test flying it today, you know, I wasn't sort of zooming up into the sky at 1,000,000 miles an hour, but equally they had plenty of power to give me essentially what I wanted, which was a smooth flying freestyle quad where I could go out to a relatively small area and basically just have fun running under and over trees and stuff like that. So these have worked absolutely fine. Of course, you know, if you were building a same one as this and you were relatively new to quads, you could use exactly these same components and just put on some RCX or Brother Hobby or whatever Cobra motors, and essentially turn this little freestyle quad into a seriously fast racing machine. So yeah, so pretty chuffed with this little guy. It's a sweet little frame. You do have acres of space in certain areas, but those areas are kind of not very useful to you when you're building. And if you're looking at this frame and thinking about using a runcam split, just be careful, because your split board is going to stick out kind of like that at either side. So if you were going to look down that road, I'd mount your split on the bottom and everything else on top of it, because that way if you have an impact you're less likely to damage the split board, which is really sensitive. As I've said in my previous videos, I've had enough of runcam splits for the time being. They're far too fragile and damage and fall apart far too easily for my liking, so I'm staying well clear for the time being. But yeah, thought I'd give you a quick chat, let you see what I'd done. Any questions, give us a shout. But yeah, this is the Geprc Swallow MSX3. Cheers guys, thanks, bye bye.